Financial Planner. Follow us on YouTube.
The global reset has begun. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, as we know, the U.S. has bases all around the world, and it kind of looks very similar to the Roman Empire, where they invaded countries, they set up bases, they put in puppet governments, and they controlled everything through force. And what we're seeing right now is that these forces, well, they're being asked to leave by certain countries. And there's a report coming out of the Pentagon where the U.S. military has more than 44,000 troops across the globe that the Pentagon claims it cannot track. Now, this is very interesting because we know the cabal uses troops, and they have certain factions within the Pentagon where they deploy them without anyone really knowing what they're doing. And they use a lot of paid mercenaries also for this, contractors and whatnot. And we see this is coming from Army Colonel Rob Manning, a Pentagon spokesman, saying that, listen, we are not at a point where we can give numbers other than those officially stated of where, these troops are, because we don't know exactly where they are, so they're labeled unknown. And we know that certain troops are being sent into certain areas, and it looks like they're trying to account for these troops. It's almost like the trillions of dollars that go missing in the Pentagon. Nobody knows where it went. Nowhere is it listed in the accounting records. Nobody knows anything. It's the same thing with the troops, because over the many, many years, the cabal had control. They basically used certain troops. They used certain funds to push operations overseas. And this is why, when we look at all the information, we see that they have no record of any of this type of stuff. We see the sanctions on North Korea. Well, they might not be having that much of an effect like the U.S. would like to believe, because we can see that North Korea is using indirect channels for exports. Now, North Korea has been using these indirect channels to basically sell coal. And for years, the coal trade has been very lucrative for North Korea. Its main ally and key economic partner is China, which imports about 22 million tons, worth nearly about 1.2 billion in 2016. But while Beijing says North Korea imports have come to a halt, Racing Trans business is booming. Since starting operations in 2015, its volume, well, they've doubled each year. And there's a lot of women working the cranes there. We see there's a target of about 3 million tons next year. And a lot of this is being shipped off to Russia and to many other countries. And it's completely bypassing the sanctions. And we know that North Korea is also pushing the opium trade, which competes with the CIA, where they have their poppy fields in Afghanistan. They don't like this. And countries will always get around sanctions, one way or another. And we see many countries are moving towards cryptocurrencies, like Venezuela. They're saying they're going to create the petro, or they drop the dollar and they deal with other countries' currencies, and they say we don't need the dollar. But what we can see over the many, many years is that sanctions haven't worked. Look at Iran, look at Cuba, look at Syria, look at Russia, look at all these different countries. They've never folded and said, okay, we give, you win. It never happens. So we can see that sanctions aren't working. We see a Russian lawmaker is saying that North Korea's ambassador to Russia said on Thursday that North Korea did not want to escalate tensions with the United States, and they would like to have some type of conference, some type of talk to discuss the issues. Now again, North Korea is trying to become a nuclear power. They want to be recognized as a nuclear power, and once they are a nuclear power, the IAEA would come in and inspect, and the cabal would have really no chance of going in and having regime change. And this is why they've been pushing so hard to become a nuclear state. And this is why I do believe that China, Russia, even the U.S., and I'm not talking about the cabal, is allowing the time for North Korea to become a nuclear state that can just really put this whole thing to bed and say, listen, they're a nuclear state right now. There'll be no regime change here. And we know that Russia and China, they're not going to let a war break out right on their border. Even though they think that the cabal might try some type of an event, which they still might, they realize they need to keep the peace in this area. We know that Trump, he already announced, and we discussed this yesterday, where Jerusalem is going to be the capital of Israel. And we see many countries are out there saying that, this is going to be a huge problem. Now, maybe it will be, maybe it won't be. I do believe that there was some type of deal made behind the scenes where we're going to see things change in the Middle East. But Erdogan is out there, and he lashed out at Trump and his decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, saying it would put the region in a ring of fire. And he's saying that this is not going to be a good situation here. And we can see there's protests already being ramped up, and we're going to have to see how this all plays out. Now, I see two different scenarios that could happen with this. One, Trump talked to all the leaders around the area, the region, and they discussed what was going to happen here. They discussed with Israel, they discussed everything, and Israel made a deal with the United States to lay off of Syria and stop the war with Iran, and they made some type of deal where there'd be peace in the region. The other scenario is that this was done for the event, where they would want the Middle East to blow up and a war would break out in this entire area and bring in Russia and China and basically bring us into World War III. Now, do I think this is what was done? No, I think it was a deal that was made, because we can see already right now that Syria has fallen. Libya, well, there's no chance of anything happening there. Russia is moving in. China's moving in. Lebanon, you can see that there's no way they're going to be pushing a war with Iran. Iran's not ready to go into a war or start a war. And with North Korea, that's a whole different story where that is going to go absolutely nowhere. But we see the State Department, they're warning Americans they are in danger for terror attacks worldwide because of what Trump has done. Now, the corporate media and everyone else is out there saying that this is going to start a war worldwide. Now, of course, whenever I see this and I see the corporate media and everyone talking about how this is going to start war and all these countries are going to get into a war, I think the opposite. Just like they said North Korea with his nuclear missile systems, this is going to start a war, we're on the edge of war. No, the only reason we'd be on the edge of war is if the cabal had some type of false flag and brought us into a war. North Korea is not going to attack anyone. The same thing with Syria, where they talk, if you go back in time, they told us that it would take years and years and years to get rid of the Islamic State. There's just no possible way they could be beaten. They're just too strong. Well, how come Russia can come right in and would it take them a year and a half? No, that was propaganda. Again, what we're seeing right now about a war breaking out in this area, it seems to me that this, once again, is propaganda because they don't like what is happening here. They don't want peace. They want war. Their whole objective from the beginning was to start a war. Because if they don't, guess what? The central bank is doomed. The cabal is doomed. Their plans are doomed. So they're going to tell you that this is going to incite war. Everyone's going to come out and start fighting. And remember, whatever the central bank, whatever these government officials, the corporate media tells you, it's always the opposite. It's always the opposite of what they're trying to do. And go back to Russian collusion. Who really colluded? Who was really taking funds? Who was really doing things illegally? Think about it for a second. This is why they couldn't prove anything, because it's really about them. What they've been doing. And we can see that the whole thing's starting to fall apart and come down around them. Now, Russia is saying that they're ready to work with the United States to demolish the Islamic State in Iraq. Let's wrap this up because we have eliminated the Islamic State in Syria. Yeah, there's little pockets here and there, but they'll be gone before the end of the year. And when we looked at the situation back in September, October, we said by December, guess what? The Islamic State would be eradicated from Syria. And here we are in December. And Russia and Syria, they're going to be joining the Geneva peace talks. Now, of course, the United States is saying, yes, we'll allow Assad to be included in the peace talks. Well, the United States is not allowing anything. Assad is the elected leader of a sovereign country, and the United States doesn't give permission for this. But they're trying to make it seem like they're the ones giving permission for Assad to attend. And we see right now that the United States, the cabal, doesn't have a leg to stand on. Russia and China are now calling the shots. The global reset has already started, and many people don't even realize this. Why do I say this? Think about it for a second. Right now, Russia and China, they're controlling the Middle East. They started the petro-yuan. Syria has fallen. There's no way the cabal can get in there. The Middle East is completely controlled now by Russia and China. Iraq is dealing with Russia. Iraq is dealing with China. Iran is dealing with Russia and China. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Libya, Lebanon, all dealing with Russia and China. Russia and China are continually speaking out against the United States. China and Russia are dealing in their own currencies. They set up the duplication of what we have here in the West. They are all ready to have this reset. They have the One Belt, One Road, where they're going to have this trading system throughout Asia and Europe and Africa. The global reset has already started. China and Russia, right now, they're calling the shots. The United States is no longer calling the shots. Countries don't even care about the sanctions anymore. They have no effect. They have no power. And we see at this point that troops are being removed. U.S. troops are being removed from Syria and Iraq. I mean, the Pentagon finally came out and said, yes, we have 2,000 troops or something like that. I think there's a lot more there. But we see the numbers are moving in the opposite direction. They're removing the troops from these areas because there's no reason to have them there. The corporate media doesn't want you to know this. They're going to tell you that they're going to be staying there forever. No, they're not. Eventually what's going to happen is, and we can see it already because the Syrian government, the Russian government already tested the waters and said, we want the U.S. to leave. They wanted to see how the U.S. was going to react, and the U.S. already started to remove about 400 soldiers. So we can see the process has already begun. We see right now that Lavrov, he agreed with Tillerson on the necessity of resuming intra-Syria talks without preconditions, which means Russia, Syria, they have the upper hand. They're going to be dictating what they want. And the U.S. is just going to listen now. The global reset has already started. You're seeing it unfold in front of your eyes. The corporate media is keeping everyone busy with everything else. And what this means is that as Russia and China get more and more power, as they take control over these areas and make more military deals, make more economic deals, make more deals, bilateral trade agreements with all these countries, and the Belt and Road and all the projects, the bridges, and all the passageways and everything gets completed, and it becomes operational, and China takes their investments and puts more into the One Belt, One Road, we're going to see everything change. And it's already changing. And right now, we're at the beginning stage of this global reset. And if you haven't listened to the interview with Jim Willey, go on to the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. Listen, because we talked about the dual universe with the petro-yuan and the petrodollar. Yes, the petrodollar, well, that is the most widely used form of payment for oil. The petro-yuan is in the beginning stages, but eventually what's going to happen is the petro-yuan is going to take over from the petrodollar, and the petrodollar is going to be used less and less and less. And we understand that the central banks are controlling all of this. This doesn't mean that the central banks are gone. This means they're moving their base of operation to a different country. This is why they set up manufacturing. This is why they duplicated everything. We are at the beginning stages, and it's going to accelerate in the year of 2018, 2019, and what they're waiting for is some type of an event, because they just don't want to switch it over, because people are going to say, well, why are we switching over to a new system? What happened to the old system? Did your old system not work? This is why they need some type of an event, and I believe they're going to continually push for some type of an event to distract from what they're trying to do here. Now, is it going to work? We don't know as of yet, because we can see their whole system is being ripped apart, and the faction, the cabal that they were using to create this event no longer exists. So either the central bank is going to have trouble right now, forces are going to be pushed against the central bank, and maybe going forward, we can use this to get rid of the central bank, but we see that this is a tough period of time right now, and the reset, they're already pushing forward. We're just going to have to see how this all plays out. And what this means is that the economy of the United States is going to change rapidly, because everything is being moved. And we're going to have to see how quickly this move is made during the next year or 2 years, because what they really wanted was a war, a huge distraction to distract and reduce the population, of course, so they can make the move. Now, without this distraction, if they don't have this distraction, everyone's going to blame the central bank, and I don't know how they're going to be able to push this to make it look like they need this new system. And this is why they're worried about cryptocurrencies, because the world is looking at cryptocurrencies saying, okay, we don't need a bank. We don't need the central bank. People can issue these currency without a centralized force. So why don't we just use this? And we see right now that the central banks, they don't want this, because they need to be in control. Because with cryptocurrency, there's no interest attached to this. There's no centralized force issuing it. And this is something they definitely don't want, and this is why they're trying to control it. Now, gold and silver, it's still important, because this ensures your wealth against inflation, against the dollar dying. You'll use this to purchase cryptocurrency or any other currency that is created, because gold and silver maintains its value. It has over thousands and thousands of years. The only reason you see gold and silver so low right now is because they've been manipulating the entire market, but when the manipulation stops, that will disappear like it always does, and those people who have gold and silver will win out. Think about 1929, 1930s, when the government said, you must give us your gold, and gold was, $20 an ounce at the time. Once the government had the gold, they revalued gold at $35 an ounce, and those people that didn't hand over their gold, guess what? It went up by $15 an ounce, and back then, that was a lot of money. And if you had a lot of gold, you made out. The same thing is going to happen once again. So get ready, get prepared. We're in the beginning stages of this global reset.